everyone who is on here. We will get started exactly in 1 minute. And I want to first welcome our guest, Toni Napolitano. We're so happy to have you all the way from the US. I think it's bright and early in the morning for you, right, Toni?
It is, and thank you, Sal. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I know it's been forever. So we've been trying to get you on for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months now, or maybe 1 or 2 months now.
Yeah.
And finally, we were able to have this time set up. So I can't tell you, first of all, thank you for being here. I don't know if you've ever come to any one of our How to Get a Job Faster. But what we try to do in a short period of time, about 20 minutes, is really kind of do a deep dive into your role. And our community is a variety of people, and those who are watching on live stream, they're either now looking to get a job, they're either high up in their roles and looking for some tips. Everyone, can you put mute on, please? Mahmoud, can you put mute on? There you go. Thank you. Um, so everyone is, in different places. Some of them might be transitioning in and out of different roles. So what you say can be so helpful and give such rich insight. So on that note, let us start. So we're going to talk kind of your life trajectory, because you have been in all different parts of, should I say, luxury good sales?
Yeah, luxury goods, retail, fashion.
Okay. So all of that particular area for the last 20 years. I'm not going to give away age. I'm going to
No,
say
we don't
20
have to go exactly into how many years, but we're in that vicinity. Yes.
So, I'm going to ask you, let's talk about, kind of where you left off in a managing director role. And we're going to look at what was a GPS. If I were to say to you, in a managing director role for a luxury brand, if you were to give us a GPS of what your day looked like, what did
Hmm.
that look like? Where did you spend most of your time? Like, give us a typical day for you, because some of us might be, kind of in sales going, I would love to be a managing director of some big brand one day. And what does that look like so people can
Be
really
careful what
understand?
you wish for, is what I would say.
All
Uh,
right.
it's wonderful. It's fascinating. It's rewarding. It's exhausting. It's everything, right? And I have actually listened to some of the interviews before on YouTube. I haven't actually attended live in person because with the time difference, sometimes it's a bit early on this side of the world. But
Sure.
I hear you ask that question, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just laughed to myself because it's never the same day twice. And I think for me, that's part of what attracted me to this profession initially. It's never Groundhog's Day. You're dealing with so many different people and points of distribution and scenarios that there's always something new and different happening, that it's never, I can't tell you exactly the same thing every day, because I'm kind of the liaison as a managing director between all of the points of sale or stores under my care and the corporate office. So you're kind of coordinating between all these different departments in corporate, be it merchandising, events, training, IT, whatever it is, how they're liaising with the stores, and then managing your stores and your teams and your businesses. So I think the most consistent thing I can tell you, which is a practice I learned very early on in my management career, I can't even tell you how many years ago at this point. I'm not going to stop and do the math, but I was working with Brooks Brothers, and they did this really amazing Franklin Covey training back in the 90s. That was the big thing, right? But they taught us, and it's a skill I took with me through my entire career, that at the start of every day, you have to take 15 to 20 minutes to set up your day. And you have to make sure that that is uninterrupted time, because your to-do list is always getting added onto. It's always growing. And most of the time, more often than not, there's no way you're going to complete everything in one day, no matter how long or how late you work. So you have to take that moment to look at what are the most pressing tasks in front of me right now, to prioritize them out like A, B, and C. A being, this is what I have to emergency take care of today. This has to be done today. B is what I would like to get done today, but if it has to go to tomorrow, it's not going to majorly affect anything. And C are things that I would like to attend to, but if it doesn't happen in the next couple of days, it's okay. It can push if it needs to. So it's like things I would like to do, but don't have to do today.
So
And you have to map
technically,
it out.
so let me ask you a question. So technically your GPS would be you start and the dial can go anywhere for the day.
100%. And the other part of that is you have to build time into your day for interruptions, because you know 100% if you schedule yourself back to back all day, you're setting yourself up to fail, because there's so many unknowns that you have to deal with. So you have to take that into consideration.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So why did you choose the role then of managing director?
I don't know if I specifically chose it initially. I think I evolved into it. I started following a path when I was in college. I was actually thinking I wanted to go into buying. So when I was studying fashion merchandising in my undergraduate program, I thought I wanted to be a buyer, and just started working in stores as like a side hustle in college. Of course, to get the discount on the clothes and, get some job experience to build my resume. And then halfway through my studies, I realized that being a buyer was not, as I naively thought, sitting front row at the fashion shows, making the choices of what everyone was going to be wearing this season. But the majority of it is running spreadsheets and sell through and data analysis. And that was not my strong point at all. But when I was in the stores, physically working, doing this like part-time job on the side of school, working for fashion, for clothing, I loved what I was doing. I was engaged with people. I was interacting with clients. I was constantly in motion. I wasn't in an office sitting at a desk. And that became more and more appealing to me. So I started excelling in that. And as I graduated, I just started going up the path to management and progressively grew into larger and larger roles.
Okay. So it was really kind of following the progression of the area that you had strength in or you were enjoying within that. And it didn't look anything like what you thought it would look like starting out or what you studied for. Yeah, that happens to most of us. We end up where we're not supposed to be, and for a good reason, right? Because sometimes it's really just following our strength. I like that. Now, if you were to look at your job as a house, and the walls were the hard skills, and the space are all the soft skills, do you think, even though you just said to me you didn't really kind of know where your day is going to be in that particular role at the highest level? So let's start at the highest level and then go down to maybe when you started off in sales, or even in that time of a buyer. As a managing director, if you had to give me a percentage out of 100, where were you spending all your time? Was it in the soft skills space or was it in the hard skills space?
80-20 soft skills.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I would say that proportionately flipped from when I started.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
That's a trend we're hearing. That's an absolute trend we're hearing with a lot of our speakers where they're saying starting out, you have to have a competency in something that has a hard skill.
yes.
And as you go up the ladder, it becomes more and more the soft skill. Wow. And if you had to identify one, and we call it human skills at GLEAC, by the way. If you had to identify one human skill that would be, let's say, the Toni signature, that has really kind of gotten you through your career, what would that be?
I'm going to cheat and give you two.
Oh,
So the first is building and motivating teams.
mhm,
That's been something that I naturally gravitated to and has just been something I enjoy and has served me very well in my career.
mhm,
And intuition,
mhm,
trusting your gut. And that is one that I had to learn to lean into a little bit more, because people don't talk about that, right? You actually do get training in how to keep elevating your team building. There's a lot of information about how to motivate your team, but there's not a lot out there saying, as a business person, you have to trust your intuition.
mhm. I love that. I really love that. Okay. And what about, I'm sure you've hired a lot of people in your role.
More than I can tell you at every level for many, many years.
What do you look for? If I were to say to you, like, how do you in that, in that process, how do you differentiate the keepers from the one you absolutely want to keep a mile away from you?
So there's a few different things, right? First of all, it depends what position you're hiring for, because when you're like, for instance, in the role I was most recently in, you're building a store team. There's so many different components that make the day-to-day in a luxury store happen. So you have sales, you have back of house, you have operations, you have support roles. There's people working visual, there's, people doing client relations and CRM. So you have to understand, one, what role you're looking to fill and what are the key skill sets for that role. For instance, if I'm hiring for sales, they have to be able to engage and connect and build meaningful relationships. That's key. But they also have to have that counterbalance of being able to uphold the operational standards of the company. The soft skills are much more important. I can teach the hard skills, but they have to be willing and open to that. It's harder to teach someone how to naturally engage and connect. I can teach you how to, fold the display correctly, how to ring on the register, how to scan a transfer in and out to keep the inventory in line. But if you don't have that natural spark within you that gives you the curiosity to ask questions about other people and get to know them and form those bonds and connections, that's much more difficult to teach. So they have to absolutely come with that intact. I can expand on that, I can broaden that, but the foundation of that has to be there. And they have to have the willingness to learn the hard skills.
And how do you interview for that?
I usually ask them to tell me about themselves. I think when you put them at ease and you get them to just start talking naturally and authentically rather than being in interview mode, you get much more rich and meaningful information. I'm not looking for a right answer. I'm looking to understand who they are. I ask them to tell me about what they're most proud of, which could be anything, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be work related. I want to know what they're most proud of. And I usually ask them to tell me about a very difficult situation, or what's the most difficult situation you've ever encountered at work and how did you handle it? And I think those answers are very telling. Going back to the intuition piece, I also feel when I'm speaking to someone, sometimes you get a spark, that this light inside of the person that you absolutely know they have it, and that you can mold them and groom them. And I always look for that spark when I see that light inside of someone, and it's very hard to define. I know that's hard to give a specific skill to the people that are listening, but I would say more than anything, that probably comes from authenticity and really showing up 100% as yourself.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I back in December, I think it was, I did this TEDx talk about human skills, and I talked about there is this, kind of superpower human skill. Parents, apparently, we notice they have it when we are younger, and somehow they kind of know when you did something that you were not supposed to be doing. They're like, "You know that." And it's that intuition. And I think we all when you tap into this, and I think it's like a muscle, it gets stronger. The more you tap into it, the more you rely on it. It's almost like it can dig through the layers of going, "Wait, I've seen this before. You felt this before. You know what this looks like." And you act on it. I think very often you're spot on in reference to that. I think that we have to sometimes not mix that up with an emotional reaction, right? Because sometimes
100%.
we can mix it up with emotions, and I think that's where intuitions can go wrong, is that we think, oh, my intuition, and it's just like you're having a really bad day, or you have an emotional reaction to something somebody said that throws you off, and then you're all of a sudden, so I think that's where the line is. I certainly see it with me, that I have to be very cautious of going, okay, is that an intuitive feeling I'm having, or is this something going on with me emotionally and I'm reacting because of that? But yeah, I agree with you, superhuman skill.
To that
Tell
point, so it's important to cultivate a practice where you check in with yourself to define that, right? So if it's like a little meditation practice or a little like putting yourself in time out, and really going internally and asking yourself that very question and listening to your inner knowing, because we always know, we just don't always trust ourselves to know.
Yeah, I probably need to do that. Just send myself back like in school to the corner of the room and go in timeout.
Go with that. 100%. It does, you know,
That's not
even
your
5
intuition
minutes
in
can do
office.
wonders. We
So
didn't appreciate back then how valuable that
oh,
was.
exactly, exactly. And what would let's go to the opposite. What is something that as soon as you can spot it in terms of a skill, you're like, there's no way that person, I'm ever going to hire them.
I don't know if it's a skill, but you would be surprised how many people come to an interview and speak poorly about their prior experience or poorly about their former company.
Mm,
So when people are sitting in front of me and saying that they're not happy where they are and not taking the self accountability, if someone comes to me and has that awareness to say, listen, I'm in a company right now that is a wonderful company, but I have learned during my time here that I'm not the correct fit for the culture. They maybe have different values or different goals than where I see myself. So I'm looking to grow and move on to next, versus someone saying, you know, they're not appreciating how wonderful I am and they're not promoting me when I should be promoted. Automatically, that's not someone I want in my organization.
yeah, yeah. One of the questions I ask, I'm for sales is, I always ask, what is it? Can you tell me about your employer? And then I reverse it and I go, what is it? Will your employer tell me about you? And it's so interesting to see the dynamic when I ask that question. And you're absolutely correct. It really gives you a mirror into accountability for where you are standing at that moment in terms of accountability. Um, so right now, and I'm going to talk about kind of cross domain knowledge. So I know right now, since you've had this 20 years in sales and you're kind of transitioning into coaching and consulting, um, what does that feel like? It's almost like you're starting over. So after a robust career of getting to the top of your game, you have decided to kind of shed all of it and go, I'm starting over. What does that feel like? Because you know what? So many of us, I did that. I practiced law, for 10 years. I think so many in our audience is transitioning right now into all kinds of side hustles. So what has that been like for you, Toni?
Exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. It's kind of like jumping out of an airplane, I think. It's really exciting, right? It's that thing that you always go, well, what if I actually did that? What if?
Mhm.
And, you know, by the time you're out of the airplane, it's too late to go, I've changed my mind. But I haven't. It's wonderful. It's a good kind of scary, if that makes any sense. It's kind of, you know, that place that once you're a while in your career, we forget that edge sometimes, right? We always need to challenge ourselves and upskill and push ourselves to do different things, because it's very easy to become complacent, especially if you're in a culture that expects you to show up in a certain way every day and doesn't leave a lot of time for you to think outside of the box, right? You just kind of like get caught up in the wheel of needing to stay on top of everything and stay ahead, and it keeps moving faster and faster.
Mhm.
So I think one of the things that I've always given to myself, I think of it like a gift, is at least once a year, I take myself out of that habit and do some kind of training or self-development, like go on retreat for a week and make sure that I'm going to places that I'm getting a different perspective.
Mhm.
So I actually did that with you at one point. We did the retreat in Venice
That's right, a creative
5
retreat.
years
I
ago.
remember we hadn't seen each other like after, well, we're not going to say this, 15 years or 20, and we're not going to tell how
We'll call
long.
it 10.
That's right. It's so important to take yourself out of your life sometimes, just to breathe. You're absolutely right. And I think so many of us forget that in our career trajectory. And the fact that you made that a habit every year, what a gift to give your soul, I think. Absolute gift.
It's oxygen. It's oxygen. You have to give that to yourself because, and actually, I think you're the one that taught me this, Sal. the people that we surround ourselves with get very used to us showing up in a certain way.
Mhm.
So, you know, you kind of get caught up in this like expectation, right? And then all of a sudden, if you start to want to do something differently, it can make them really uncomfortable. So it's important that you're surrounding yourself with other people that support you going in a different direction and trying new things.
Wow.
So that, aside from giving me support and allowing me to take this risk and jump out of the airplane, so to speak, and follow my heart's desire at this moment, it also allowed me to bring some really amazing tools into a corporate culture that wasn't aware of these tools before, or wasn't thinking that they could be helpful. So I
Mm.
started bringing some of these mindfulness and well-being practices, especially in the past year during the pandemic, and was able to give those to people in my company at a broader level, including GLEAC, and expose people to different things that were not common in our industry that are now becoming more accepted and more integrated, and
Yeah.
supporting the teams in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Our texture outside of our industry allows us to bring so much more into it when we show up.
Right.
So for those of us, everyone here in the group, if you have questions, now is the time to put them in chat. Toni, if
Yes.
someone wanted to get a job with a luxury brand right now, what is your advice to them? What's the best way to get in to a luxury brand?
It depends what position you're looking to get, first of all. But I would say overall, understanding the culture of the company that you're looking at, really doing your research about who the company is and what they stand for, what their values are, because companies are always searching for people that are passionate about their brand, right? They want people that are intrinsically aligned with where they're going and what they stand for. And the culture from one company to another can be vastly different just within the luxury retail sector. So do your research, understand what resonates with you, and then you get to show up and say, these are the things that I'm passionate about. And if that's really well aligned, you're halfway there.
Okay. Question, how does your job affect your general lifestyle? How is it affecting yours? Hold on, let's talk about that.
Well, I guess that also goes back to the question as to why I made such a drastic change recently. It it is one of the downsides to that industry, right? There are so many perks, there are so many exciting and beautiful things, but it does take a lot of your time. There's not a lot of work-life balance. It's not something that the industry is known for, with good reason. So, you know, you have to decide what's important to you to be super successful. At least for me and for a lot of the people I know, it's very hard to have a work-life balance. It usually skews much more heavily towards work, and your personal life can suffer.
Mm. And just because we have people from, all different parts of the world here, in terms of, someone coming into a
Mhm.
luxury brand, let's say in a sales role, getting to the level of managing director, what kind of ranges are we looking at in terms of salary of starting to all the way up? Because we're looking at the US here, for those wanting
It's
that.
it's really vastly different by company and by skill set. What I will tell you, and I can't really give specifics because we sign a lot of non-disclosures for every
Yeah,
company,
just
but
give a range. So, sales roles coming in, you might be between 20 and 30,000. Managing director roles, just a very broad scope. So our audience can.
sales roles coming in can start anywhere from like it's usually in most companies an hourly plus commission,
Mhm.
right? So it's usually somewhere in the range of, depending on your experience level, it also varies greatly depending on the volume level of store that you're in. For the same
Sure.
company, being in a small store versus a large store can be two completely different situations. I would say sales probably 17 an hour up to 25 an hour, depending on the volume of store that you're in,
Mhm.
uh, and your pre-existing client list. That's a really big thing. Are you coming to the table with heavy hitters that are kind of already relationships built with, or are you coming completely green and they have to give you all the leads and teach you how to develop those relationships, right?
Mm,
If you already have existing clients, you're much more valuable
mm,
in terms of salary negotiation coming
Mhm.
in the door than if they have to teach you from the ground up.
And what are
And
the commissions like?
so it depends on the company, but I've seen anywhere from 3% up to 7%.
Mhm.
Generally with ready to wear, it's a lower commission if it's just a ready to wear company because there's not as much margin in it as leather goods.
Sure.
Uh, Beauty and cosmetics is a lot more margin.
Mhm.
So, you know, they can offset that in the commission. But
Okay.
I will tell you, depending on what kind of life they want to have and the skill set that they have with them, I have seen the top salespeople, and when I say top, I mean like maybe the top 10 in the country in each company that are probably making more than all of the managing directors because they're selling at such a high level. And then once you hit some really important sales levels, they start piling on extra bonuses and incentives.
Yeah. And what
So
does that level like? $500,000 in sales, $1 million in
it's
sales? Like,
usually over 1 million. And at this point, it's probably over like 2 to 3 million in sales.
mhm.
At one point, a company that I worked for in the past, and I can't name which one, but they had a beautifully structured incentive saying for every $1 million you sell, we give you a $10,000 bonus.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if
Okay.
you sell 1 million, you get 10,000, and it went all the way up to if you sell $10 million, you will get $100,000 bonus and 2 plane tickets to anywhere in the world.
Okay. Very cool. And what about managing directors? Like what does salary kind of look like?
Again, that really depends by area and by experience level. But I would say probably starting around, depending on how big, like how much volume. It's really so it's hard to say just for the title because it really resonates to the number of people reporting in and the volume level that you're managing. I would
Sure.
say anywhere maybe from 100,000 upwards, just depending on how big that volume level
Sure.
gets.
So $100,000 a year or upwards.
Or upwards, yeah.
Okay. So if you were to say to someone right now, what is the one skill that they can perfect? If they wanted to upskill, they want to go for that, let's say 100,000 or above, the rule, managing director rule. What is the one thing you would encourage them to perfect or upskill in right now that would absolutely make them a standout? So let's say they learn the company values, all of those things, but there's this one thing when you're managing director that
It's not one thing. That's at that level, Sal, it's not one thing. You have to be so proficient in so many things. So maybe it's the ability to adapt quickly to change because you're moving in and out of so many different situations so quickly every day. So maybe
okay,
adaptability.
adaptability, and that's a
Yeah.
human skill. That's a human
Coincidentally.
skill. Okay, so we're wrapping up with a couple of questions. What kind of accomplishments tend to be valued in this field? And I'm going to ask one before that one. What was like
Okay.
the most extravagant thing you've ever done, for fashion houses? I know you've worked for some of the biggest ones in the world, Christian Dior, et cetera. Like, what is the most extravagant thing you've ever done in this role, at a senior level in a fashion house?
That I've ever done personally.
Or that the company did for you?
Oh, there's so many beautiful things. They treat you very well in terms of experiences at some of the brands. So I've had experience with a brand where I was taken to Paris and toured through the couture archives and taken to like lovely dinners and all of these behind the scenes experiences that are usually reserved for clients. So they give you that experience coming in the door so that you understand the world they're trying to bring the client into. So
Mhm.
that was really incredible. And getting to sit at a fashion show, of course, for me was a dream come true.
In Paris. Wow. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Let's answer the last set of questions. What kind of accomplishments tend to be valued in this field?
In retail, 100%, it's top line sales generation.
Mhm.
So it's hitting your metrics and achieving your goals is always the first and foremost thing that they look at as an industry, and usually across the board in every company is the highest weighted metric that you're ranked on at the end of each year.
And what are some other metrics that they rank you on other than, your
Achievement.
service?
It's usually goal achievement. It's usually quality of sale. So most companies look at something called UPT, which is units per transaction,
Mhm,
and VPT, which is value per transaction. So
mhm,
they're looking to see that if you are having a relationship with your client, right, you're understanding their lifestyle and you're meeting their needs, which
mhm,
means you're not just selling them one item in every transaction because you're usually dressing them for a trip or an event or something, which means they need like head to toe look or luggage for their trip or something for their children. You're really trying to kind of serve 360. If you are just transactional, like someone's walking in the door and says, oh, I'm looking for a new handbag, and you just sell them the handbag, you haven't discovered anything about them to give them a more robust experience.
wow, wow. Interesting perspective. Okay. If you could do it all over again, would you choose the same path? And if not, what would you change?
Oh, wow. I've had so many incredible experiences that I don't know if I would necessarily change anything. I don't think I would change anything because that would take away some of the relationships that I have and the people I've met along the way, and I wouldn't want to change that. I would go back and tell my younger self, though, to trust my gut more. I think the times that I really got into a place of like stickiness or stress, which is usually internal more than anything, right? Like we're experiencing that inside and we have this vision that it's like all happening out here, but it's all inside. I would have trusted my gut more earlier on.
I'm going to ask, one of the uncomfortable questions, but I think it's important as females, we ask and answer this question.
Do
So,
it.
you've risen to the top at the expense of not building a family. Did you ever go back and think, I would have done it differently starting out?
No. For me, no. I have the pleasure to be an aunt, and I
Yeah.
think I'm a fantastic aunt. I think I knocked that out of the ballpark.
Thank God. I'm a pet owner, so we're good. Yeah.
That too, that too.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that I had that skill set built into me, and I think everyone's journey is different. For me, I had to figure out who I was as an individual, and a big part of that came from establishing independence and identity in my career. That was very important to me. And I don't think I would have had that same journey or same experience if I had started a family much earlier.
Mhm. Okay. You talked about guts. How do you identify your guts or stay true to it?
Over the years, we've become good friends. So I know when I can feel that it almost feels like the best way I can describe it is like a pendulum or like a pulling, right? Like you pull forward to lean into something, or you can physically feel your body pulling away from something. So
Mhm.
you have to identify whatever that kind of sign is for you that you know your body goes into
Mhm.
when something is right and something is not right. But there's always a way that you can physically feel it in your body.
I feel it with red lights in my head. And some people who are very close to me and they introduce me, they're like, "We need to introduce you to someone and let us know if you see any red lights."
I love that.
Um, one of our last questions. How relevant to your work is your undergraduate major?
For me, I did actually study fashion merchandising and marketing. So I took a different position in the field, but it was very relevant to my field. And then I ended up doing my MBA in international business. So my degrees were relevant, but overall, I would say in the industry, it's really great to have the degree. It definitely opened doors for me in terms of interviewing, right? Because at a certain level, there's a filter where they'll say for a managing director, we don't want to interview anyone that doesn't have a college degree. So there is that one piece of it. However, that being said, experience and results also count for a lot more than what field your degree is in. So being able to prove what you bring to the table and the results you were able to drive at a company uh, is really much more relevant than, I mean, I could have studied anthropology and come up with these same results and it would be the same thing. It doesn't matter.
And I'm going to end on, asking this one question, which is, how has sales changed pre-COVID and post-COVID?
Night and day. Um, Night and day. I think one, it showed who truly had relationships because there was a moment for months that we were just connecting with the clients that you truly had relationships with, because it even became initially like these people become your friends. You work with them so often. So
Mm.
who you're reaching out to say like, hey, are you guys okay? Is your family okay? What's going on? How can I help you? More of even just those wellness check-ins, right? That became a filter of who you truly had a relationship with versus who you just helped one time.
Mhm.
Um, it definitely shifted to online selling experience, which is causing the industry to shift because luxury was very focused on a one-on-one experience. And now they're having to rethink that, one, because of COVID, but also because of millennials and Generation Z,
Mm.
because they are much more aligned with an online experience and don't necessarily want what was traditionally a luxury experience where you come and someone tours you through the entire store like they're touring you as a docent through a museum, telling you about the furniture and the paintings on the wall and the history and the heritage and the DNA of the brand. They want to just come in and buy the sneakers or buy the it bag or, like in and out. And the industry is having to adapt to that. The client is speaking and the industry has to listen.
Well, Toni, I can't tell you how happy I was to finally have this done. I mean, what an absolute pleasure to have you on.
It's my
And thank
pleasure to be
you
here.
on behalf of our entire audience. There were so many lovely nuggets that you gave us. And before you go, I always have the one kind of putting you on the spot question. What
Tell
is
me.
the riskiest thing you've ever done, Toni?
Probably what I'm doing right now is stepping away from an established career and starting over. I would say aside from that was I actually took a gap year.
Oh, you
At
did?
Yeah, I took a gap year. I decided to take a sabbatical and give myself a break. And I traveled extensively for the year. I went to Bali, I went to Australia, I went to Nicaragua. I started like dabbling with a yoga certification and doing all these different things.
Mm.
And everyone thought I was crazy. Like, not necessarily people in my industry, but like my family, my friends, like, what are you doing? You have this job that we would all want, and why are you stepping away from it? And I had every intention to go back to that same job. I ended up going back to a different one, which was also amazing. But that gave me so much perspective. And I felt like I came back with this renewed passion and excitement and enthusiasm. Exactly. Someone said, eat, love, pray. Not far off from that. But
I think we all want to do that. We all want to do
it
that.
was the best gift that I ever gave to myself.
That
Uh,
is awesome. That is awesome. And we're going to end on that note because I think we often forget we cannot give what we do not have within us. And particularly in this COVID time, I can't encourage all of you enough to make sure you can't show up for the world at your 200% if you're not at your 200%. So on that note, thank you all for attending today. Toni, it was an absolute pleasure. And everyone, I look forward to seeing you next month on our talks. Bye.